first ever experience with LinkedIn Live. Actually, it's not my first ever. I was invited to be a guest on a LinkedIn Live program about a week ago with the collaborator, John Moore. And it was
I saw some of that. Yeah, that was good.
And but I decided that it was finally time for me to attempt to host a LinkedIn Live episode myself. And of course, there's virtually no one that I would turn to sooner than yourself. So welcome to this episode.
I appreciate being your first. Although Sean, your wife, your lovely wife, might have been a better choice, but I'll do.
That's true.
I'll do my best.
She does. I have to say, as much as you're easy on the eyes to some, she does look much better than you do.
No question. No one would deny.
So all kidding aside, of course, you and I go way back, but there might be a few people in my network who don't actually know who you are. So can you just take a moment, introduce yourself, introduce your company and what you do for a living?
Sure. Yeah. I want to meet those two people that don't know who I am in relation to you. Those people that have just been underserved all these years. In all seriousness, my name is Scott Cassidy. I work for a company called Aslan Training and Development. We are a sales training and sales leadership training company. Been around for 24 years. I think we kind of got established in 1996. I was a client first back in 2003-4 area. And loved the training so much that about 2 years ago, I came over to help them with marketing, sales. I do a few different things over here, including working with fine fellows like yourself on our channel program. So it's been great. Got a wife and 4 kids. Allison and I have been married 28 years.
It's impressive.
Yep, just past our 28th, and 4 lovely kids, all of whom have been home for COVID. And they're starting to sprinkle back out into the world over the next couple months.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and for crying out loud, just hearing your introduction made me think of about 5 things that we could talk about. But in a post that I put out just an hour or so ago, I said there were sort of 3 main things we're going to talk about. The first is friendship in the workplace, and we'll start there in a minute. I'd like to talk a little bit about the word trust and sort of the speed and the power of trust in business relationships. And then you mentioned your wife, which is perfect because I know something about you that others probably don't, and that is you do some marriage counseling. And I'd love to get your opinion on how that sort of relates to working with some of the sales managers that you work with. But let's start with friendship.
Sure.
So you and I go ways back. There might be a few folks listening who know the story, but do you care to share a little bit about sort of, where our relationship started and sort of, the journey that we've been on?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's over 35 years. Began in a hallway or a locker room. I can't remember exactly the first meetup in high school. I came in as a junior. I transferred into the school in, I think it was March of my junior year, and I arrived literally in time for the baseball tryouts. And then I think I saw you either the next morning or that afternoon in the school, and it was fast friendship. You became one of my best friends in high school, and showed me the ropes when we first got started there. And as everybody that went to school with us knows, we were the first graduating class there, so it was like, that was wild being,
it was a big deal.
15 of us or whatever it was, being the first graduating class. And so, and then the weird thing is we kind of lost track of each other for, 20 years or something. And kind of met up at a reunion, and I was just switching over to Aslan a couple of years ago, and we found some common ground in our faith and in our life's mission in terms of what we do for a living. And we got back together, which has been awesome.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny remembering that you actually joined just before baseball season started. The irony is that I didn't play baseball.
I know.
And yet we became fast friends, even though you were spending your time on the baseball field.
That's right.
And what struck me, when you were saying that you've been with Aslan a couple years, is that you and I sort of reconnected. And I think we've connected sort of, a time, here and there. But we really reconnected what, like a week after you started
Yeah.
with that, like a week or two after you started with Aslan, and I was running sales enablement for a company called Cass at the time.
Yep.
And that's when I think I remember I think we were sitting in a Mexican restaurant with a couple of guys having a beer and lunch. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, she said, you and I need to talk.
Yeah.
like there's actually something here that we need to run with.
I can remember kind of explaining what we do and, saying that the core demographic for our clientele is typically, over 100 sales reps. And, I kind of started getting into it a little bit, and you're like, wait, what? Why can't I buy it? I have, like, however many reps you had. It wasn't, I don't think, quite 100. And I said, well, we should talk then, because, clearly you've heard something that you like. So yeah, never talk yourself out of a sale. So I think we did wind up, maybe it wasn't that company, but your next company, I think, what became a customer, which was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and people know that, many people know this about me. I am now a certified Aslan instructor.
Yep.
And a certified Aslan reseller, as the name that you all use. And it's literally been, an incredible 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so and to be very honest, I can't think of another business relationship that I have with someone who really started out as a friend and was a friend. And I think sometimes people are reluctant to go into business or get into business with friends. So I'm curious to ask you, in reflecting on the past couple of years, what has our friendship meant in terms of our business relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually haven't thought of that angle you're talking about either. That most times you might be friends with people that you work with or even sell to. Like, we become friends with our clients sometimes, and sometimes people that sell to me become my friends. And that is probably the only way I've ever become friends with people I work with. Now, in my current role, there's two people. The president over here at Aslan and I have been friends for 23 years. And he brought me over to run marketing. So we were friends before I went to work with him. The same thing happened with you and I, where we put this business deal together. And I know you want to get to the word trust, but it's exactly the word I would use. Why you would pull a friend into something like this, the mutual trust that is created out of that relationship, sort of transitions or even traverses into the business itself. That's why I think it works. There's a lot of responsibility that goes into my role of bringing on the next great Aslan certified reseller. And I trusted our relationship enough to know that you were going to give your best effort. If I was to send you leads or give you opportunities, that you would do your best to close those. There was that trust that exists. I think on the other side, and I'll let you answer this for yourself, you trusted me to not be leading you astray into a fool's journey, that this was something that was not only going to be good for you from a financial standpoint, but fun to be a part of. So
yeah,
I think trust was the key.
So I couldn't agree more. And your point about becoming friends, I mean, and I hope that I have a few friends and a few colleagues, watching this at some point. But the reality is some of the best friends that I've made in the last 20 years are people that I've worked with closely, either as colleagues or as customers. And so, to have this opportunity to work, with someone who was, a high school friend, right? And the fact, to your point, we just, it just clicked right in. I couldn't agree more on this notion of trust. And, a lot of times people refer to the Stephen Covey 6 Habits of Highly Effective People, or I guess it's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And my book, The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, right? But Stephen R. Covey, his son, wrote the book, The Speed of Trust.
Right.
And when I reflect on the past 2 years, I think there's no doubt that the trust relationship that you and I had was not only powerful, but it enabled us to operate at a speed that I don't think other business relationships necessarily can. In fact, the one thing that stands out in my mind is there, and this, and this is sort of a very transparent moment for me. I was sort of at that, I sort of was at that go, no go moment, right? Sort of the point of no return.
I remember.
And being very transparent, I had to make a bit of a commitment and an investment.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure I was ready. I wasn't sure I could handle it. And you and I had a very sort of direct conversation. And you said, look, Chris, I'm not pushing you here, but I think this is the right move for both of us. And I can't, and I've told you that I can't tell you how much I appreciated you giving me that, sort of, those words of encouragement,
Well, and I think, we all have relationships with people that we go to in times of doubt, times of need. Most of us, probably our spouse is one of those people. Maybe a parent, maybe your father or your mother is another person. But it's awesome when a friend can be completely honest in a scenario like what we were talking about. I can remember it was right in the beginning of COVID. You and I were down at a sales conference, the last living sales conference probably for
yeah, I think so.
for the year.
I think so.
We were at Sales 3.0 in Orlando, and actually some people can probably find that video of you and I,
out on the balcony.
I think we were kind of making fun of the people that hadn't shown up because a lot of people missed a great event, but now we realize now how big this coronavirus had become. But I wouldn't trade that for several reasons. That conference was worth it for me in building our business plan together, because I think you and I had some time to after hours have a cocktail and talk about the runway ahead of us if we put this together. And I think when you came back and said, geez, I'm not sure I'm quite ready, I was able to point back to our conversations and remember some things that I think maybe you had lost track of about how great this opportunity was together. And I had full confidence in you, probably more than you even had in yourself at that moment. And I think that was helpful. That goes all the way back to our favorite word that we're talking about, trust. You trusted me, and it made for the right decision.
So let's build on that, because you're right. I needed some encouragement and a little bit of pushing, and in, if I can use the word, even in sort of a loving, way as a friend. How can the folks that maybe are listening now or might listen, after the fact, what advice would you give somebody who is maybe trying to establish that trust relationship and trustworthiness with someone, so that they can guide them in a way that is in their best interest, in spite of the fact that they might be reluctant, whether it's trust with a sales counterpart, trust with a manager or a team member, or with a customer.
Yeah. I mean, I think you know all about our program, and maybe some people don't. But it's I hate even to call it a program, because it's more of a life decision. The way I look at it is, first of all, it starts with motive, right? So motive is transparent. People can figure out pretty quickly where you're coming from. And if your motive is to influence and change people's minds for some other reason than what's in their best interest, they'll see through it, right? We're in the silly season of politics. You try to convince somebody to go to the other side right now, and it is a fool's journey. There is no way to do that unless you try what I try with children of mine, and maybe people that I don't necessarily align with. And you just try to take what we call take the trip. You try to really take the trip to their side of the world and look at things through their eyes. If you imagine the globe and you think about, what life looks like to me from the North Pole might look totally different to you from the South Pole. And so what's down for me is up for you. And I need to really come around to your side of the table and see things through your eyes. Did I mix enough analogies in there? Tables and globes?
I'm checking off the box. I'm playing bingo at this point.
So the point is, you cannot influence somebody or persuade them in any way until you see life through their eyes. It's Covey's what is it? His third habit that says seek first to understand before you can be understood.
Yep.
And so, as a person that's seeking to build relationships with fellow salespeople, to build a relationship, trusting relationship with a client, you first need to look at life through their eyes. What's important to them? What does this relationship look like, and how did they benefit from it? Whether it's a business relationship or a friendship. and to truly show that you are that your motive is pure, the best first step is to understand what makes them tick and what's important to them.
Yeah, yeah. And I love some of your phrases. Motive is transparent is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that you talk about is serving others,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the day, not only are we more likely to influence people for their own good by having a truly other-centered motive, as we like to say,
Yeah.
right? But what does that do to us individually
Yeah.
when we operate in that manner?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of studying of this, a lot of surveying, and we maintain that you are never more fulfilled than when you're serving others. And if you look at the name of our company, you might think Aslan sounds familiar, but I can't remember where I heard it. It's the lion in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis is, um, an amazing writer, and that story was fantastic. And when you look at the lion's personality, who he was a servant leader, and he means a lot of things to a lot of people, and some may even say Christ-like. And just this approach that he put everybody ahead of himself. And when you build yourself, and you hear the term servant leader thrown around all the time, there are many famous leaders that consider themselves, servant leaders. I think I would go beyond leadership and say, just be one that serves others in general, whether you're in a leadership role or not. When you live an other-centered life, when you live sort of a way to again put the other person's needs ahead of yours, it is extremely fulfilling. And I still fall back into the old habits from time to time because, frankly, we're all born selfish, right? You've never had to say to a 2-year-old, "Can you be more selfish? Can you take those toys from your brother?" I mean, that would be great if you could do that. You don't have to ask them to do that. They're born that way. They're going to say me and mine. That's how they're born. But when you wake up that first Christmas, when your 4 kids run to the tree and don't grab their own presents, but grab the presents to give to mom and dad,
Yeah.
that'll well you up a little bit. Because
Yeah.
that's the first time they're making that transition to
Yeah.
being other-centered.
Yeah. Well, and I love the term servant leadership. In fact, one of the things that I've been talking with a lot of the folks that I work with is the notion of servant, and I'm going to be politically correct in the way I rephrase this, servant salespersonship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, the notion of servant leadership is very common. I think the notion of servant salespersonship is not as common, but I think the more and more we can think of it that way, the better off we are. And it's interesting, and you know this. I mean, I had a group recently go through one of my programs, and just that one concept alone has made an enormous change for them, right? Because they're approaching every conversation trying to put the other person first. So if I may, you touched on Aslan and some of the religious correlations, which is a good segue to something that I know that you're involved in with your church, which is marriage counseling. And we've talked about this, that sometimes you correlate what you do there with some of the conversations you have with sales managers. So help the folks that are listening sort of understand, what is that correlation and what lessons have you sort of learned in that experience that you've taken to being either a sales manager or working with sales managers?
It's so funny. I mean, I wrote a blog about this maybe a year ago, and I think you find it on LinkedIn on my profile. But I did make this equation that selling, can save your marriage, and people are like, "What the heck does that mean?"
I think most people think it's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Learning to sell well. When I say learning to sell well, taking another centered approach to selling is the same thing that we talk about in marriage prep. And in the Catholic Church, the marriage preparation is a mandatory event that must take place prior to being able to be married in the church. And we take it very seriously. We've been doing it for 20 years, 19 maybe years.
Wow.
And we teach what I consider to be the cornerstone principle of any marriage, which is communication, which is, what I majored in. It's what I'm decent at and what I've made my life's work doing, trying to become an effective communicator. And in a marriage, communication is the root of every other conflict, every other conversation, and anything that you have to deal with in marriage can be solved with good communication. If someone cheats on somebody, you can communicate about it. If you've got financial trouble, you can communicate about it. If, anything, I believe, and I maintain, you can communicate your way out of effectively without fighting. And those are the things we sort of talk about. Understanding where your partner comes from. The baggage that they bring into the marriage is an important thing to comprehend. They came from a very different background than yours. You came from a different background. With that comes baggage. That means that maybe you have a different way of fighting than they do, and you've got to unpack that. So the way that it translates into a sales relationship or any other relationship is, quite frankly, just understanding the other person first. And before you try to influence or persuade or any of the things that go on in selling or any relationship, let's be honest, we're all salespeople. We're all trying to get people to do things we want them to do, regardless of whether we make a living at it.
Right.
And so the idea is seek first to understand the other person, to steal from Covey, to take the trip and understand life through their eyes, and then drop the rope. It's another concept that you're very familiar with over here. It's don't push them. Make sure they feel like they're the priority and that there's no pressure for them to take your advice or your idea. And so, I think the marriage preparation, which, by the way, is so rewarding, talk about giving back. When we look back at the 15, 20 years of couples that we've, spoken in front of and helped mentor through the process, the marriage rates or the divorce rates are so different from the national averages. The national averages have now dipped. I think it's under 50% of marriages, make it past a certain number of years. But when you go through pre-Cana or marriage prep, they jump to 75% success. So there's something that happens by making that communication and that effort up front that builds the relationship on solid foundation to the point where the success rates are astronomically higher than they are in the real world.
So let's correlate that to the sales manager and let's say sales professional relationship. Because in similar fashion, what would you say is the percentage of sales reps out there that are hitting their numbers?
Yeah, we've studied it. It's 50%.
Yeah.
50% of reps are not making quota. Yeah.
So very similar. And what I hear you saying is that if a sales manager, sales individual, sales professional relationship were to start with something similar, right? Whether it's the beginning of the year or the beginning of, the working relationship, where they sit down and lay out a plan and really establish sort of the groundwork for communication and for trust, and do the work up front. I think I heard you say, do the work up front. It sounds like there's a very good chance that success rates would increase.
Yeah. You've been on the podcast a few times, Ales with Aslan, and one of the things that I jokingly start every episode with is it's a therapy session for those who sell for a living and those who help those to sell for a living. And in the beginning, I called myself a marriage counselor for sales and sales reps, sales leaders and sales reps. And so I've always had this feeling that this equation, this skill that I've built by teaching marriage prep spills over well. And I think you nailed it. I think, it's all about building a foundation of good communication. We believe, and not to get too far into sort of our leadership training program, but we believe that so many people measure just the results of their sales reps. And that's great when your sales reps are killing it, right. But the 50% that aren't making it, and by the way, when I say killing it, I would say killing it is not making 100% of your goal. It's something much more than that. And so those that are not making goal or can be doing better, they need to measure something else. And we look at things like desire, the desire to improve. We look at, your typical activity metrics, but we go further. We look at productivity metrics. So what are the things that move things forward? And then finally, the capabilities. Do they have the capability and what, the skills and knowledge to do it? And so when a sales rep and a sales manager can agree on those things, have the desire, agree on the productivity metrics and the skills that need to be improved or the capabilities that need to be improved, they have the basis of a great plan that the rep should own, and the sales manager is riding shotgun, helping them get better every step of the way. And like anything, you need a wing person.
Yep.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
A wing person. You need a wing person, a wingman, to see things that you don't see yourself. You can record calls and you can do things that allow you to self-observe, and those are awesome things to do. But there's no substitute for somebody that's watching you like your spouse does that helps you improve. Your sales manager and your sales rep should have a very similar yet, what's the word when you don't have an intimate relationship? What's that word? It's not an intimate relationship, but it is all the other platonic is the word I'm trying to think.
Okay.
You have a platonic working relationship between your sales rep and your sales manager. All those same communication benefits can make that relationship, very, very satisfying for both parties.
Excellent. Incidentally, remind me next time I invite you on, I'll have my thesaurus and dictionary by my side in case you throw me any curveballs like that. No, I think it's great. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me is you get buy-in from your sales rep or from your teammate, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just the leader or the manager saying thou shalt, right? Mm-hmm. It's an agreement.
We use the word alignment. Like you have to both see the same problem, and we have lots of effort around making sure that, as the leader, and you've been at this, I've been at this 30 years, right? So if I'm talking to somebody that's at this for 5 years, there's a chance that I've experienced, a lot more things than they have. But if I just say, Chris, look, I've done this 25 times, just do it this way, that is not probably going to move everybody. It might, but it might not.
Some. Yeah.
We believe that if I have a conversation with you and say, tell me what you're observing and how you're feeling about this and why this isn't going the way you'd like, and then maybe I can offer my suggestion later, you'll be more open and receptive to that once you've had a chance to self-reflect. And that's the order it should go in.
Yeah. As we like to say, people resist change if they feel like their right to choose has not been respected. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely.
One more thought on this, and then I told you I was going to ask you 3 questions
I'm scared.
that you don't see coming.
Once in high school, and I didn't hate it.
I'm going to be a little bit other centered with my questions. So I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little bit self-centered with my questions.
Okay. All right.
But no, the final thought that I have on this, and I'd love your opinion or response is, I like to say to the folks that I've been working with is, I think communication problems aren't the real issue. I think interpretation problems are the real issue, because we see and we hear certain things and we sort of project the word that you used early on. We project a motive, right? We project an intent, and usually it's from our own point of view rather than really taking the time to understand what was their perspective, right? Mm-hmm. What was your intent? So I encourage people, think of it as, how are you interpreting what's happening, and how might somebody else be interpreting what you are doing?
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting, because I think you come from a technical background, system engineers and software and how everything works. One of the terms we use when we're engaged in a communication of any sort is the listening aspect of it. There's all kinds of corny phrases. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionally, and all those kind of things. And those are great. Those are easily memorable and fun. But the one thing that I love that I've learned in the last few years is this concept of clearing your cache. We all come in with baggage. We have things that we, if I'm talking to you and you're telling me a story and I go, oh my God, I've heard this before and I know how this ends, and so I'm going to tune out as a sales leader, for example. You are not listening. You are not listening with intent. You are not listening to. And by the way, in marriage, back to that, if you do that at home, you're same thing. You're gonna miss things. And by the way, your spouse is going to notice that you're not really listening. And so the idea of truly committing to listening, clearing your cache, clear all of the things you think you already know, and just listen and learn is absolutely paramount to what you're talking about. Because, you think you know what I'm going to say, you think the intention is clear, and you might as well just tune out, because you're not going to get to the meat. You never know what the nuance is going to be of the story I'm going to tell. My wife says it all the time. You're like, let me finish and I'll explain that. Meanwhile, I'm trying to solve the problem, right? This is a guy thing, I think.
Exactly.
I'm solving the problem after the fourth word.
Exactly.
But that's not what she wants.
Exactly.
It's like, remember White Men Can't Jump?
Yeah.
Don't get me the glass of water because I'm thirsty. I want you to empathize with my thirst. I'm like,
exactly.
That's my life. That
I don't
movie
understand
line
that.
is my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that way. I'm not wired that way. So you mentioned the fact that I'm more of the technical guy.
Yeah.
Certainly I have the technical background. And this is where some of my questions, my three questions are going to be more self-centered, because as you know, I run a training business called Demo Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with a lot of sales engineers. And one of the main things that we do, not the only thing, but one of the things that we do is give demonstrations.
Yeah.
So now I know that early in your career, you worked for Xerox. So my first question for you is, did you ever give a demo that went horribly wrong? And if so, why?
Absolutely. And by the way, it's Kodak. So you got to edit that out. You can't ever associate with me with Xerox, because
I have no idea where that came from.
Of the hundreds of people at Kodak that I worked with, they will really be confused.
Your dad was with Kodak for years.
My dad was with Kodak.
I knew that. I have no idea where that came from.
Xerox was number one. We were number two in the market. So that's just remembering copiers and printers and micrographics.
That's exactly right. So Kodak.
Yeah. So actually, if I may, my second job after Kodak was a software company called Parametric Technology. And I do remember just if you could draw up a car crash of a demo, this would have been it. And, just 30 seconds on what happened. I had a great relationship with my system engineer. I would set up the scenario. I would sort of provide the context. They were there to then take it and just bring it to life. This was CAD/CAM software, so pretty awesome stuff at the time. And what happened was, probably my fault. It was a team communication fallout. We went to the demo probably too quickly, and our regional vice president last minute parachuted in and wanted to come to this meeting. It was at a very large account, and it was a great opportunity for us. And the system engineer kind of freaked out in the middle, just couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, couldn't, as you always say, can't talk and move a mouse at the same time, could not get any of the features to really come to life, and just got really flustered. It was very sad, and I was trying to save it by doing what good sales reps do, tap dancing over in the other corner and trying to keep attention off it.
Right.
The VP decided to say, this isn't working, in front of everybody, embarrass the system engineer, and just pull the plug on the whole thing.
Oh.
And, I think people just kind of saw through that. I think people understood that, an SE might have a bad day. And I think would have had a better chance of righting the ship if I was just allowed to tap dance a little bit while I gave the system engineer 2 minutes to just kind of pull his mind back.
Figure it out.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what went wrong there? As I reflected on this years later, I think, we didn't have enough communication up front to make sure the system engineer, not that you script those things, but you do a little bit. Like, here's the things I want to show. You got a little piece of paper with a couple ideas. Maybe we didn't do enough of that, and allowing a VP of sales to parachute in unannounced in the last couple minutes and not give them the direction of their role in that. That was my fault. Like, that can't happen. And that guy screwed it up for everybody. By the way, he was the worst sales leader I have ever worked for. He was just horrific, and part of the reason I didn't stay with that company.
Well, and I'll ask this rhetorically, anticipating your answer, but I'm going to clear my cache, as you just encouraged me to do. What do you think his motivation was in blowing it up like he did?
Yeah, that group had an interesting reputation as just being. You remember the movie The Boiler Room
I've
with
heard of
Vin
it. I haven't
Diesel,
seen
and
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
this idea that sales was all about, the sales rep winning and the customer losing in the negotiation. That was the way that leadership team sort of believed. Um, that company's lived a long time after that, and I'm fairly convinced it's because they changed that style. I think the motivation was a couple fold. One is to show his power over his sales rep, maybe knowing that deal was going south anyway, but to assert his strength and his masculinity in front of all of us. And the second thing, I think it was, he didn't know any better, right? I think it was sort of how he was taught, how he was mentored, and didn't even have the thought of the other centered piece. Like the motivation was
Yeah.
completely self-serving, not, oh my gosh, what that kid is going through right now. That poor young man is just, now granted, that guy's got to own it. He freaked out. And when I say
Totally.
freaked out, he wasn't running around with his hair on fire, but he was clearly lost.
Totally.
And rather than helping it, he just poured gas on it. And I
Yep.
think that's so self-serving. So
Yep.
I would say the answer to your question is he had a self-service motive.
Yeah, that and I couldn't have given all the color that you provided, but that was exactly what I was thinking. Is he was probably personally
Yeah.
embarrassed, right? And it was hurting his ego on some level,
Yeah.
right? And it was sort of out of almost self preservation,
Yeah.
right? That he felt like he had blown up. Okay, that was question number one. Question number two, can you think back to the best demo that you have received from a software company or from another company? And is there one thing about that demonstration that made it so engaging, compelling, impressive?
That is a great question. So I'm going to go to something relatively recent, since I've been at Aslan. I can't remember exactly when, but and what the product was, but I remember the rep and and again, it was a virtual, so maybe it was even this
Yeah.
year, a virtual demonstration of a piece of software. And so what you have is the system engineer is sort of walking through the screens and showing me, and we're all on camera, and the combination was really interesting. And so I don't know if this is what you're looking for, because I think it was the sales rep maybe that said this, but the system engineer is very focused on driving, and making sure they're answering my questions and showing me what I need to see. And I must have made a face that looked like confusion or something, like, stared at the screen or kind of looked confused. And the sales rep, I think, could have been the system engineer, but I think it was the sales rep, said, hold on. Let me just stop right here. Scott, I could see you're squinting, you're looking, just stopping and going, it looks like something bothered you there. There was confusion. I said, you guys are doing a great job. I'm not sure what that means right there. And wow, I'm really glad you stopped me. And because I'm not sure I would have asked the question if you hadn't stopped me. So I would say that the combination of the two of them being flexible enough to see my reaction, because this was not a verbal thing, and be astute enough to call a timeout and make sure, we call that check your six, right? Check
Right.
your six, look behind you, make sure your wingman is still back there and there's no bogeys behind you. Make sure I'm tracking with you. And I wasn't, and they stopped, and we did wind up doing business with that company. Not totally because of that, but that made me feel like they had my best interest in mind.
That is such a great story. I mean, you touched on so many things there. I mean, first of all, the fact that the sales rep was so engaged in the conversation and really paying attention to body language through Zoom, which is or whatever web platform it was, which is a difficult thing to do. The fact that he or she, I don't even know the gender, sort of interjected and said, "Hey, time out. I want to make sure you're tracking," and then they addressed the issue.
Yeah.
I just love that story. Fabulous.
Well, and I think, in everything we do, there's a formula, there's a process that needs to be followed, but the really good ones are able to, in a very other-centered way, go off script and go with the client, go with the customer, go with the sales rep. Be human, be conversational. We talk about it in our discovery. It can't be machine gun questioning. It's got to be conversational discovery, curiosity. That's what gets you the best answers, not your machine gun approach I used to do when I was in Kodak training in 1990.
People buy from people.
That's it.
We say it all the time.
That's it.
So that was question number 2, and your answer was fantastic. Question number 3. If you could ask me any question, what would you ask me?
What's the pipeline look like for the end of the year?
Wait a minute. This isn't our
because you want to go on that big trip next year to finish off your 50 and 50. I would
like
to know how you think you're going to pay for that with your. What's a question I would want to ask you? I would say, given, we're both, 30 years into our career, and, you've had all kinds of leadership jobs. You've had, system engineer jobs. You've been a consultant. You've sold. You've serviced. I mean, you've done a lot of different things. What is your favorite part of all of that? And it's a 2-part question. And how is that influenced what you're doing now and helping you? I mean, you're off to an amazing start with us. Your company's off to an amazing start. So how did whatever you learned in your favorite role there sort of influence and help you in this role that you're in now?
Yeah. So I love the question, and I'm glad it took you a minute to get it out, because I needed a minute to come up with the answer. I narrowed it down to one simple response to the first part. What do I like the most? Is making a difference. Everywhere, even, and you're right. I'm the first to admit, early, in the early part of my career, I bounced around to on a number of different jobs and roles. I always wanted to find the biggest problem and tackle that, because I had a couple reasons. First of all, I figure that's the one place that nobody else wants to go, so I may as well go solve that one. But I always wanted to make a difference. And I love the second part of your question, because the second part is, how did that sort of shape what I'm doing now? Honestly, it wasn't until now that I'm self-employed and running Demo Doctor that I feel like I can make the maximum possible difference with as many organizations and as many individuals as possible. And frankly, there's nothing more satisfying for me than knowing that I really am making a difference, and I have the opportunity to make a difference. So great question. And it's actually very satisfying for me to hear myself give that answer, to be very
well, and that solidified why we're back working together, because when I was asked why I was leaving a 23-year career at Schneider Electric, I answered almost the exact same way. I've been helping Schneider Electric grow for 23 years. I feel like I can help 23 Schneider Electrics grow like that if I'm given the opportunity, not because I'm some awesome consultant, because like what I learned there can be helpful to more people than I can help inside of a big organization like that, if I get to the right people. And I think everybody at our company feels that way, and everybody that's associated with our company seems to feel that way too, which is a tribute to you and what you're building down there at Demo Doctor.
Yeah, it's a bigger playing field at the end of the day, right? It's a bigger playing field. So, all right, man. Well, Scott, thank you so much. This has really been great. Once again, you've sort of helped me jump into sort of an unknown, an unknown territory, sort of
the deep end of the pool,
uncharted waters.
That's right.
Hopefully, we had a few folks that joined in and enjoyed the conversation. I know you and I'll be speaking soon. And to anybody who is listening, I'm planning to do this once a week. So, stay tuned. Any closing thoughts from you, sir?
No, just anybody out there that struggles with any of this, we are more than happy to chat. Chris and I work hand in hand on a lot of stuff, and I just think people don't get this, because I don't think there is as many other-centered people in the world as there probably should be. But the podcast I do has it's for free. It's just to help. It's to help sort of build a relationship between sales leaders and sales reps. And there's just some of us that like to give back. And I think, Chris, you're one of them. And so anything we can do to help, whether we profit from it financially or not, where we want to get into sales groups, and hopefully things like this, just if you don't pay a dime to us at any point in the future, is helpful and helps you, enjoy all your relationships, but really your relationship in selling and system engineering and sales management. That's my dream. That's what gets me up in the morning, is to help people do that.
I love it. And where can people find your podcast?
Yep. So you can find it on our website at aslantraining.com. You just go to the resource section. You can go to LinkedIn every Friday and just look at P. Scott Cassidy, my profile. I post them every Friday morning, and don't usually drink a beer that morning. It's recorded before, but we don't have to give away all the secrets.
Yeah, man. All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. We'll talk to you soon.
Enjoyed it.
Bye all.